My name is Ethan Walker, and when I first met Sophia Turner, I thought I had found the love of my life. I was 26 years old, working hard at my job as a financial analyst, still figuring out who I was and where my future was heading. Sophia was 24, radiant, beautiful in a way that wasn't just about her looks, but about the warmth she carried with her. I met her at a charity event, one I didn't even want to attend, but fate has its ways of putting the right person in front of you when you least expect it. That night, we talked for hours, and by the end of it I couldn't imagine not seeing her again. She laughed at my jokes, she listened to my dreams, and she looked at me like I was the most important man in the world. Our love grew quickly. Within a year, we were inseparable, and after 2 years, I asked her to marry me. She cried tears of joy when she said yes, and in that moment, I believed in forever. We had a modest wedding, nothing extravagant, but it was perfect because it was ours. For the first few years, our marriage was filled with love, passion, and dreams of the future. We didn't have much money, but we had each other, and that was enough for me. Life wasn't always easy. We lived in a small apartment in Boston, barely making ends meet some months. I worked long hours, determined to build a future for us, while Sophia spent her time painting. Art was her passion, her dream, and I supported her as best as I could. I believed in her talent. I believed that one day she would make a name for herself in the art world. We had nights of eating ramen noodles, weekends where our idea of a date was walking in the park because it was free. But I loved those moments. I loved her. I thought she loved me too. But as the years went by, I started noticing changes. Sophia grew restless. She complained more often about the life we had. She wanted more money, more luxury, more attention. She began criticizing me in ways she never had before. She would say things like, "Ethan, don't you ever want more than this small apartment? Don't you want to live like real adults? Don't you ever think about giving me more?" At first, I brushed it off as stress, but the way she looked at me began to change. The warmth in her eyes was fading, replaced by something colder, something I couldn't quite recognize. Then I started hearing a name I would grow to hate, Marcus Caldwell. The first time she mentioned him, it was casual. She said he was a gallery investor who believed in her work, someone who was helping her network and get exposure. I remember smiling, happy for her, because I wanted nothing more than to see her succeed. But soon, his name came up more and more. Marcus bought her expensive painting supplies. Marcus took her to high-class art events. Marcus told her she had incredible potential. Every time she said his name, I felt like he was pushing me further out of her life. One night, I came home late from work, exhausted and hungry, only to find a note on the table. It said, "Don't wait up for me. I'm at an art gala with Marcus." I sat there staring at those words, feeling something break inside me. When she finally came home in the early hours of the morning, I confronted her. I asked why she hadn't told me she'd be out so late, why she didn't even think to text me. She rolled her eyes, brushed me off, and said, "Ethan, don't be so dramatic. It was an art gala. You wouldn't understand. You don't fit in there." I told her it looked bad, that she was out with another man until 2 in the morning, but she snapped back. "He's just a friend. Stop being so insecure." Deep down, I knew. I knew Marcus wasn't just a friend. The truth hit me 2 weeks later. I left work early one day, thinking I'd surprise Sophia at her gallery. But when I got there, she wasn't painting. One of her friends, nervous and guilty, finally admitted it to me. She said Sophia was with Marcus, and it wasn't just business between them. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. When Sophia came home that night, I confronted her again, this time with no room for lies. I asked her directly, "Are you seeing Marcus?" And this time, she didn't deny it. She looked me in the eyes and said, "Yes, I've been seeing him. He gives me things you never could. Stability, security, a future. You're a good man, Ethan, but good isn't enough." Her words destroyed me. The woman I had built my life around, the woman I thought I'd grow old with, was leaving me not because she didn't love me, but because I wasn't rich enough. I asked her, my voice shaking, "So you're leaving me for money?" She replied coldly, "I'm leaving you because I want more out of life, and Marcus can give me that." And with that, she walked out. Just like that. The vows we made, the years we spent together, all meant nothing to her. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain. I left our apartment because I couldn't stand the memories. I crashed at my friend Daniel's place, barely eating, barely sleeping, replaying her words over and over in my head. Good is enough. I felt like a failure, like I had been replaced, discarded like trash. But as the days turned into weeks, something inside me began to change. The pain hardened into anger. The anger sharpened into determination. I realized I had two choices. I could drown in misery, or I could rise from it. I chose to rise. I threw myself into work with a focus I had never known before. I stopped wasting time, stopped doubting myself. I worked harder than anyone in the office, and people noticed. Within months, I was promoted. Then came another promotion. My salary tripled in less than a year. But it wasn't just work. I started learning about investing, networking with people who were smarter and richer than I had ever been around. I read everything I could get my hands on about business, finance, and growth. Slowly, I built my own wealth, piece by piece. Every late night at the office, every dollar I earned, every connection I made, it was all fueled by the memory of Sophia walking away with Marcus. It was all driven by the promise I made to myself, that one day, she would regret the choices she made. One day, she would look back and realize what she lost. I wasn't going to beg for her. I wasn't going to chase her, but I was going to make sure she saw what I had become. And fate, as cruel and ironic as it can be, was already setting the stage. Because no matter how far Sophia thought she had run from me, no matter how high she believed she had climbed with Marcus, our paths were destined to cross again. And when they did, I promised myself that I wouldn't be the man she left behind. I would be someone entirely different, stronger, sharper, untouchable. The day would come when she would stand in front of me, and she would realize that she had traded love for greed. And when that day arrived, I swore she would be the one left in tears. When I stood outside the glass doors of Marcus's penthouse, the reality of Sophie's betrayal hit me like a freight train. The city lights stretched endlessly behind her, shimmering in her eyes. But those eyes no longer belonged to the woman I thought I knew. They belonged to someone else, someone who traded our history for luxury, for wealth, for a life she clearly thought was better than ours. I clenched my fists, forcing down the rage that threatened to consume me. Every memory of our marriage, every quiet moment we had shared, was now tainted by her greed and ambition. I had always believed in love, in trust, in the life we were building together. And yet, here I was, watching her laugh at Marcus's expensive jokes, their hands brushing as if our years together meant nothing. My mind raced. What I had to do now was not yell, not confront, not beg. I had to plan. Revenge, calculated and precise, was the only way to reclaim my dignity, and perhaps to teach Sophie a lesson she would never forget. The first step was understanding. I couldn't act in blind anger. That would ruin everything. So I retreated, hiding in the shadows of the building, listening to their conversations through the open balcony doors. I discovered everything I needed to know. Marcus was not as rich as he appeared. His wealth was mostly borrowed, his lifestyle built on unstable investments and deceit. Sophie, blinded by the glitter, didn't see the cracks in his empire, but I did. I returned home that night, my mind buzzing with plans. Emma, ever the voice of reason and strategy, met me at our apartment. Her eyes, sharp and alert, could always read me better than I read myself. "You look like a man possessed," she said, pouring a cup of coffee. "What's your plan?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, though a small, dark smile tugged at my lips. "But it has to be perfect. It has to expose her, humiliate her, and make her realize that nothing she chases can replace what she lost." Emma nodded. "Then you need patience, precision, and the perfect bait." Over the next week, I meticulously gathered information. I learned the patterns of Sophie and Marcus, the restaurants they frequented, the events they attended, the people they trusted. Everything was a thread I could pull, leading to a carefully woven trap. I created a new identity, a persona that Marcus would respect, one that Sophie could never see through. I invested my time in understanding the psychology of betrayal, of greed, of vanity. Each night, I wrote down a detailed plan, noting the exact sequence of events that would ensure Sophie's downfall. The night I was ready, I called Emma. "Tonight," I said, my voice low, "we make her regret everything." We staged a high-profile charity gala, a perfect social scene where Marcus would want to shine. Invitations were carefully sent, the perfect combination of influencers, investors, and media personalities to ensure that every move Marcus made would be scrutinized. I attended under my new persona, Ethan Cross, a successful entrepreneur from out of town with a keen interest in investments, enough to pique Marcus's ego, but not reveal my identity. Sophie, as expected, was radiant in her designer dress, her smile smug and confident. She didn't recognize me at first, and I let her smugness grow. Marcus, ever insecure despite his facade, immediately tried to impress me. "Ethan, I hear you've been making waves in the tech world," he said, extending a hand I didn't shake. I simply smiled, letting him continue, planting seeds of doubt in Sophie's mind. Throughout the evening, I orchestrated small, precise situations, whispered comments, carefully planted rumors, and seemingly coincidental encounters, all designed to unravel Marcus's composure and make Sophie question her choices. I watched as her confidence faltered, her laughter becoming nervous, her eyes darting toward me with a flicker of confusion she couldn't place. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Marcus, drunk with ego and the attention of the crowd, began boasting about an investment opportunity one had fabricated, presenting numbers that seemed real but were impossible. Sophie, realizing the house of cards she had stepped into, tried to intervene, but it was too late. The media, which had been tipped off to cover high-profile investments at the gala, started asking pointed questions, documenting Marcus's blunders. Sophie's panic was palpable. She could see, perhaps for the first time, that her perfect life was built on illusion. Her social mask cracked, revealing a woman who had traded love for material wealth, only to find herself trapped in a world far less secure than she imagined. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. Watching her realization unfold was more satisfying than any words I could have spoken. Emma, standing beside me, whispered, "You did it, just like we planned." By the end of the evening, Marcus was humiliated in front of investors and media alike. His empire's cracks were exposed, and Sophie's eyes filled with tears, not just because of Marcus's failure, but because she finally understood the cost of her choices. She had left love for money, and in chasing the illusion, she had found emptiness. Weeks later, Sophie tried to reach out, her messages filled with apologies and pleading. I read each one carefully, the memory of our shared past intertwining with the stark reality of her betrayal. I didn't respond. There was no satisfaction in forgiveness. Satisfaction had already been achieved in the subtle, precise execution of justice. Emma and I watched from a distance as Sophie's life unraveled further. Her social standing diminished, Marcus withdrawing support as investors lost faith. Each consequence was a testament to the careful planning, patience, and understanding of human nature we had applied. And yet, even as I savored the victory, I knew this was not the end. Revenge, once tasted, leaves a residue, a lingering need for closure, for finality. Sophie had been humbled, but the final act, truly reclaiming peace for myself, was still ahead. In those quiet nights, I reflected on love, betrayal, and the human tendency to chase what glitters rather than what sustains. Sophie's choices were extreme, yet common, an echo of the vanity that lurks within us all. I had merely ensured that reality would catch up to her in a way she could never ignore. The story of betrayal, of lost love, of calculated revenge, is not a tale of cruelty, but of clarity. By seeing the truth behind appearances, by understanding the fragility of ego and desire, one can turn a personal wound into a lesson, not just for the betrayer, but for oneself. And in that clarity, I found a sense of peace that Sophie's tears could never undo. A sense of closure born not from anger, but from the quiet triumph of intelligence, patience, and the unyielding resolve to reclaim what was mine in dignity. Ethan sat quietly in his dimly lit apartment, the rain drumming softly against the windows, mirroring the storm inside him. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, confrontations, and revelations that had left him exhausted, yet strangely invigorated. Ever since he had learned about Sophia's betrayal and Marcus's manipulations, he had been plotting every step carefully, making sure that when the time came, it would be flawless. He wasn't a man driven by mere anger. He was driven by the need for justice, for retribution that would make the truth undeniable. Emma had been a constant presence, her sharp mind and unwavering support guiding him through the labyrinth of emotions and strategies. Without her, Ethan often thought, he might have faltered, but together, they had hatched a plan that was as clever as it was satisfying. Sophia, on the other hand, remained oblivious to the storm brewing. She had immersed herself in Marcus's world, basking in the temporary thrill of wealth and attention, completely unaware that the consequences of her choices were inching closer with every passing day. Marcus, confident and arrogant, believed that he held all the cards, underestimating Ethan's intelligence and patience. But underestimating someone who had once loved you and lost you, that was a fatal mistake. It all began on a seemingly ordinary Thursday evening. Ethan had invited Sophia to a celebratory dinner, framing it as a chance for reconciliation. Sophia, eager to flaunt her new life, had accepted without hesitation. Marcus had insisted on joining, of course, smugly confident that Ethan would have no power in this scenario. Emma, ever cautious, had given Ethan a last-minute warning. Remember, the key is subtlety. Don't let them see you coming. Ethan nodded, sipping his coffee thoughtfully, eyes narrowed with determination. When Sophia arrived at the restaurant, she was radiant in her designer outfit, heels clicking confidently against the marble floor. Marcus, ever the showman, greeted her with a boastful grin, clearly expecting Ethan to crumble under the pressure of their combined presence. But Ethan simply smiled, calm, collected, every movement calculated to convey confidence and control. Emma, sitting discreetly at a corner table, observed silently, ready to provide subtle cues if necessary. The atmosphere was thick with tension, though to an outsider, it appeared to be just another social dinner. The first course arrived, light appetizers that barely registered in anyone's mind, as the real focus was the simmering undercurrent of confrontation. Ethan engaged Sophia in polite conversation, his tone measured, carefully crafted to lure her into a false sense of security. "I'm glad you came tonight," he said softly, his eyes locking with hers. "It's important to address things, don't you think?" Sophia, taken aback by the calm and sincerity in his voice, nodded, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. Marcus, sensing the tension, laughed too loudly, attempting to dominate the conversation, but Ethan's serene presence made his efforts look petty and transparent. By the time the main course arrived, Ethan had subtly steered the discussion towards memories, shared moments, seemingly innocent recollections of their past. "Do you remember our first trip to Venice?" he asked, smiling faintly. Sophia's eyes softened, a pang of nostalgia evident, though she quickly masked it with a coquettish laugh. Marcus rolled his eyes, clearly impatient with what he perceived as trivial sentimentality. But Ethan was building his foundation, carefully laying bricks that would soon culminate in the collapse of Sophia's fabricated world. Dessert was when the real plan unfolded. Ethan had arranged for a private video montage to be displayed on the large screen in the restaurant's private room. Emma had compiled it meticulously. Footage of Marcus's business dealings, subtle evidence of lies, and most importantly, moments where Sophia had flaunted her betrayal. Her own words, her own actions, unedited and undeniable. As the first frames flickered to life, Sophia's confident facade began to crumble. Marcus, realizing the gravity of what he had walked into, paled slightly, his arrogance giving way to unease. Ethan watched them closely, every micro-expression catalogued in his mind. Sophia's lips parted slightly, a faint gasp escaping, her eyes darting frantically to Marcus. "What is this?" she whispered, voice trembling. Ethan leaned in, voice calm, steady, almost gentle. "This is reality, Sophia. The truth that you thought you could ignore." Marcus stammered, attempting to interject, but the montage moved faster than his words could. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal was laid bare, leaving no room for denial. Tears streamed down Sophia's face as the room's silence pressed heavily upon her. The power she had wielded, the control she had imagined, evaporated like mist under the morning sun. Marcus, humiliated and cornered, could only watch in stunned silence. The veneer of sophistication shattered. Ethan stood slowly, moving toward Sophia with deliberate calm. "I loved you once, Sophia. I trusted you. But trust isn't given lightly, and betrayal leaves scars deeper than you can imagine." His eyes were not filled with hatred, but with the quiet strength of someone who had endured pain and emerged unbroken. Emma, sensing the perfect moment, gently guided Ethan out of the immediate spotlight, ensuring that Sophia had to face her actions alone, the full weight of her choices pressing down on her. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening, almost serene. Ethan breathed deeply, feeling a cathartic release. The revenge was not about cruelty. It was about truth, exposure, and reclaiming the dignity that had been stolen. Weeks passed. Sophia had retreated into her own world, isolated and reflective, grappling with the consequences of her decisions. Marcus's reputation suffered irreparably, his arrogance having been publicly dismantled by the evidence that Ethan had so cleverly orchestrated. Ethan, meanwhile, had reclaimed not only his peace, but a sense of empowerment he hadn't felt since before the betrayal. Emma remained by his side, a steadfast companion and strategist, quietly proud of how gracefully Ethan had handled the entire ordeal. One evening, as Ethan walked along the river near his apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, he reflected on everything that had transpired. He realized that revenge, when executed with intelligence and integrity, could be a form of liberation rather than mere vengeance. He felt lighter, unburdened, as if every step forward was a reclamation of his own life, a reaffirmation that he was not defined by the deceit of others, but by his own resilience and choices. And so, as the city lights flickered on and the night embraced the skyline, Ethan knew that life would continue to challenge him, but he was prepared, not with anger, but with wisdom, patience, and the quiet satisfaction that sometimes justice delivered in its most elegant form was more powerful than any moment of blind retribution. Sophia had learned her lesson, Marcus had faced his downfall, and Ethan had emerged stronger, a testament to the enduring power of dignity, intelligence, and heart.